All right, Colton. You've been back for like what? 10 minutes, and you're not going to leave us hanging. We need the details. How'd it go?
Yeah, man, we want the full report. Did you manage to keep the hero stuff a secret, or did you somehow let it slip between your awkward, romantic lines?
Come on, guys, it was just a date. Just a date? You met her during a gunfight, Colton. That's like the least just a date I've ever heard of.
Yeah, and you kissed her, right? Don't tell me you didn't go for it.
Yeah, okay, I kissed her, but it was just a little one. Nothing crazy. Ooh, Mr. Smooth over here, moving in for the kiss on date 1. So, what's the plan now? Another romantic date where you save her from a bank robbery? No, I'm trying to keep things normal, alright? It's not like I'm going to be dragging her into superhero stuff. I barely managed to get through the date without spilling anything.
Well, considering the circumstances of how you met, you're doing better than I thought you would. So, what did you guys talk about? Did she bring up the shooting?
Yeah, we talked about it a little. She's still shaken up about it, but I didn't want to dwell on it too much. I kept things light, talked about music, food, normal stuff. And she doesn't know you're part of the Hero League, right? No way. I made sure not to mention anything. You know the rule, no revealing your identity.
Yeah, well, good luck with that if you keep seeing her. You're gonna have to come up with a lot of excuses when you randomly disappear to fight a villain or two.
Hey, maybe you can bring her to one of the Hero League parties and just pretend you're, like, really into costume parties. All right, laugh it up. But I'm serious. She's great. It was just nice, you know, being able to talk to someone who doesn't know all the crazy stuff we do every day. Yeah, I get that. It's good to have a break from all this, especially with everything going on lately.
You deserve it, man. Just don't let her figure out you're a superhero by the second date, alright?
Don't worry, I've got it under control. But for now, let's keep the superhero stuff out of the conversation. We'll see how long that lasts.
Guys, we've got a situation. We just received an anonymous tip. Big Red is making a huge gun deal tonight. It's happening at the abandoned warehouse by the docks, and he's not selling just the usual stuff. He's bringing in heavy artillery. We're talking military-grade weapons, high-end tech.
When's this supposed to go down?
Soon. We need to be there in less than an hour. The informant was vague about the timing, but we know it's happening tonight. If we can intercept this deal and take down Big Red, we could shut down this entire gun-running operation.
This is big. Bigger than we thought.
We're going to need a plan. What kind of backup do we have?
It's just us for now. We need to keep this operation quiet. No loud explosions or drawing too much attention. We don't want to spook Big Red or his buyers. If this goes wrong, we could lose him.
All right, we'll need to be stealthy. Get in, intercept the deal, and take them down before they can escape with the weapons.
We can split up. 2 of us can flank the warehouse from different entrances. The rest can head straight for the deal. If Big Red has backup, we'll need to disable them fast.
Do we know who he's selling to?
Not exactly. The informant said it's a group looking to expand their influence, but that's all we've got. Either way, they're after some serious firepower, and if we let them get their hands on it, it'll only make things worse on the streets.
All right, let's get this done. Guess your post-date chill time is officially over, huh? Yeah, seems like it.
Gear up. We leave in 5. We've got 1 shot at this.
As the group quickly prepared, the weight of the mission sank in. Taking down Big Red wasn't just about stopping one gun dealer, it was about preventing an entire wave of violence that was spreading through the city. They'd been tracking him for weeks, and now, they finally had a chance to put an end to it. Colton, Zach, Chris, and Mr. Dugan moved with purpose, knowing this mission would require them to be at their best. There was no room for error. Within minutes they were ready, heading down the hall toward the garage where Mr. Rence and the van would be waiting. Colton glanced at his friends, his mind now fully focused on the task at hand. They were about to take on one of the most dangerous operations they'd faced in weeks, and they couldn't afford to fail. As the van sped through the dark streets toward the abandoned warehouse, the group sat in the back, heads down as they discussed their plan. Colton, Zach, Chris, Mr. Rence, Mr. Dugan, and Mr. Callaway were all focused, the tension in the air unmistakable. They knew how critical this mission was. We're going to have to split into 2 teams. We need one group to intercept the deal as it happens, and the other group to raid the warehouse itself. We can't let them get away with any weapons or hide anything illegal. Makes sense. We hit them from both sides. Quick, clean, and we get everything.
I think we should split like this. Colton, Zach, and Mr. Rence will intercept the deal. You three are fast and can use telekinesis and shapeshifting to adapt to whatever goes down with the buyers.
Sounds good to me.
Chris, Mr. Dugan and I will hit the warehouse itself. There's bound to be more weapons and evidence hidden inside. We'll need to clear it out and make sure they aren't planning something bigger.
We'll sweep the place. I'll use my powers to control any surrounding plants to help contain the area.
If anything goes wrong, we meet back here immediately. No heroics, we stick to the plan.
As the van grew closer to the abandoned warehouse by the docks, the group mentally prepared themselves. The time for joking and lighthearted banter was gone. This mission needed precision and focus.
This place...
What is it?
This is the same warehouse I used to use back when I was... when I was evil. I used to bring people here. Back when I was trying to take over the world, I would use their blood to make red shirts. Those shirts were going to be part of my army. My mind was twisted back then, but I remember it all so clearly now.
Wait, you made shirts out of people's blood?
Yeah, it was dark. Really dark. I was in a different place back then. This place was a key part of my plan before you guys stopped me. Funny how life comes full circle.
Well, you're not that person anymore. You've got us now, and we're here to bring this place down for good.
Yeah, you're right. We're not here to reminisce. We're here to take down Big Red and stop his operation.
Let's make sure this place never gets used for anything like that again. As they reached the warehouse, the team exited the van, quietly splitting into their assigned groups. The night air was thick with tension, the sound of waves crashing softly against the nearby docks. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and ominous. Colton, Zach, and Mr. Rence peeled off, heading toward the far side where the deal was supposed to take place, while Chris, Mr. Dugan, and Mr. Callaway prepared to raid the building from the other side. Mr. Dugan lingered for just a moment longer, staring up at the warehouse. His past had collided with his present in ways he hadn't expected, but this time, he was on the right side of things. He clenched his fists, determined to make sure his past stayed buried, and followed Chris and Mr. Callaway into the darkness, ready to confront whatever they found inside. Mr. Dugan, Chris, and Mr. Callaway moved silently along the edge of the warehouse, their footsteps barely making a sound as they scouted for an entry point. The night air was cool, and the distant hum of the city felt a world away from the dark and ominous building looming ahead. Mr. Dugan was scanning the property carefully, his eyes narrowing as he searched for something he hadn't seen in years. The old escape hatch he had used back when he was still evil. It had been his failsafe, a way to disappear into the shadows if things ever went south. His mind raced back to those times, to the darkness of his past, but he shook it off, focusing on the task at hand.
There, it's still here.
You sure about that?
Positive. I built this place with a way out in case things ever got too hot. We can use it to sneak in undetected.
Good thinking. Let's use it to our advantage.
They crouched by the overgrown patch and Mr. Dugan brushed away the weeds and dirt, revealing a rusty, metal hatch. With a grunt he pulled it open and a dark, narrow passageway stretched out below them.
Cozy.
Yeah, well, it wasn't meant to be comfortable. Come on, it's the best way in.
One by one they climbed down into the passageway, the air growing cooler as they descended into the earth. The walls were damp, and the faint echo of their footsteps bounced off the narrow corridor as they moved cautiously forward.
This place gives me the creeps, man. Can't believe you used to hang out down here.
It wasn't exactly a vacation spot. I built it to escape if I needed to. Didn't think I'd be coming back here for something like this.
Let's keep it quiet. If this place is the hub for all those weapons, we're walking right into the heart of Big Red's operation. We need to be ready.
After what felt like an eternity of crawling through the narrow passage, they finally reached the end. Mr. Dugan pressed his hand against the roof of the tunnel, finding the latch. With a soft click, he lifted the hatch, revealing a dimly lit basement. One by one, they climbed out, stepping carefully into the belly of the warehouse. As they looked around, their eyes widened in shock. The basement was massive, stretching out farther than any of them had anticipated. And it was filled, wall to wall, with weapons. Stacks of rifles, crates of machine guns, pistols, grenade launchers, and military-grade hardware lined the room. The sheer volume of it was staggering, more than they could have imagined.
This is insane. Look at all this.
This is where it's all coming from. This is the heart of the operation.
Big Red's been stockpiling weapons here. We have to confiscate all of this before it hits the streets.
If we don't stop this, the streets are going to be flooded with this stuff. We have to shut this down, now.
We'll need to get these weapons out of here or destroy them, but we...
Going somewhere, boys?
They all spun around, instantly on alert. Standing at the far end of the basement was a man, a tall, muscular figure dressed in dark clothing, his face partially hidden by the shadows. He held a large assault rifle, the barrel pointed casually in their direction. You must be the one snooping around. Big Red told me to expect some interference, but I didn't think it'd be you.
Who are you?
Let's just say I work for Big Red, and you've made a big mistake coming here.
If you know who we are, then you know we're not leaving without shutting this place down.
That's what you think, but I've got orders, and you're not walking out of here alive.
For a tense moment, the room was silent, the standoff hanging in the air. The weapons around them were a reminder of the stakes, and they knew that one wrong move could turn this into an all-out firefight.
What's the plan?
Get ready to move, fast.
And with that, the room exploded into... The basement of the abandoned warehouse was thick with tension, the air charged with the anticipation of violence. The man, tall and imposing, stood before Mr. Dugan, Chris, and Mr. Callaway, his assault rifle held ready. The dim light gleamed off the weapon, and for a moment it felt like time stood still. Then with a sudden deadly burst of energy, the man pulled the trigger. Chris, now! Mr. Dugan reacted instantly, leaping to the side as bullets tore through the space where he had been standing. His blades flicked out from his hands, the cold steel glinting in the faint light. Chris raised his hands, summoning the plants from the cracks in the stone floor. Vines erupted from the ground, snaking across the floor toward the man. But the gunman was quick, firing into the vines as they came at him, shredding them before they could fully entangle him. Mr. Callaway, always the strategic mind, grabbed one of the compact weapons from his Hero League utility belt and fired a stun bolt toward the man. The bolt of energy whizzed through the air, aiming to disable him, but the man ducked behind a crate of rifles, the bolt missing by inches. Split up, we can't let him pin us down! Chris darted to the left, using the crates for cover, while Mr. Callaway took a different angle, already scanning the area for more weapons or tools to use. Mr. Dugan charged forward, his blades extended, slashing through the air. He moved quickly, aiming for the man's exposed side, but the gunman blocked the strike with the butt of his rifle, spinning to fire at Chris again. Chris retaliated, throwing up a shield of rapidly growing vines just as the bullets sprayed toward him, the vines splintering and crumbling under the assault, but holding long enough for Chris to roll to safety. Now, with a flick of his wrist, Chris sent the remaining vines flying toward the gunman's legs, managing to trip him up for a brief moment. Mr. Dugan lunged again, this time slicing through the man's rifle with a clean, precise strike. The weapon fell to the ground in 2 pieces, sparking as it hit the floor. The gunman cursed under his breath, but he was far from finished. He pulled out a smaller pistol from his side holster, firing wildly at Mr. Dugan, forcing him to duck behind cover. From his utility belt, Mr. Callaway pulled out a small grenade-like device, Hero League's signature flashbang. He tossed it expertly toward the man, and with a blinding flash, the room was filled with light and sound. The gunman stumbled, disoriented, and that was when Chris made his move. Got him! The vines lashed out again, this time wrapping around the man's torso, pinning his arms to his sides. He struggled, but the more he fought, the tighter the vines constricted. Company's here. Before they could celebrate, the man let out a low growl, and with a swift motion, he activated a small device on his belt. The room rumbled, and several crates behind him exploded outward, revealing more armed thugs rushing into the basement. On the other side of the warehouse, Colton, Zach, and Mr. Rence crouched in the shadows, watching the deal unfold. Big Red was standing in the center of the loading bay, a burly, intimidating figure with a red beard that matched his nickname. He had a large metal briefcase open in front of him, revealing a collection of small, sinister-looking bombs. Miniature bombs. Those things could take out entire city blocks if they're distributed. We can't let him get away with those. Wait for my signal, let's get the upper hand. As Big Red turned to speak to his buyers, Zach made his move. With a flick of his hand, he used his telekinesis to lift the bombs straight into the air. They hovered above the deal, catching the attention of everyone in the room. What the hell? Got his attention. Big Red's head snapped up, his eyes widening as he saw the bombs suspended in mid-air. Who's out there? Show yourselves, you cowards! Zach, with a look of concentration, flicked his fingers, sending the bombs sailing across the room to keep them out of reach. The buyers scattered, trying to avoid the hovering explosives. You're not going anywhere with those bombs. This deal's over. Oh, you're dead, boy. Big Red's eyes scanned the area, but before he could react further, Colton stepped forward, electricity crackling at his fingertips. He raised his handgun, but before he could pull the trigger, Colton sent a bolt of lightning crackling across the room, striking the gun and knocking it from Big Red's hands. The man let out a shout of pain, clutching his hand as it smoked from the impact. Mr. Rence, having shapeshifted into a heavy armored version of himself, barreled into the group of buyers, knocking several of them to the ground. His strength and durability in this form gave him the advantage as he cleared the area, tossing aside anyone who stood in their way. Big Red, seeing his deal falling apart, made a desperate dash for one of the crates, but Zach wasn't letting him go that easily. With a sweep of his hand, he sent a wave of telekinetic force crashing into Big Red, throwing him across the room and slamming him into the wall. Looks like the deal's off. You ready to give up, Big Red VO? You think this is over? It's just beginning. Colton stepped forward, electricity sparking between his hands. Mr. Dugan and the others found themselves surrounded by more of Big Red's thugs, but they didn't back down. With Chris controlling the vines, Mr. Callaway providing support with his high-tech gadgets, and Mr. Dugan's lethal blades, they fought off the reinforcements with precision. We need to take this whole place down. This can't stay standing. Mr. Dugan's voice echoed in their minds. We'll do it. But first, let's finish this fight. The battle was fierce, but the Hero League team was more than a match for Big Red's lackeys. As they cleared out the basement, Chris caught sight of the massive stockpile of weapons. The two battles raged on, upstairs and downstairs, as the Hero League fought to shut down Big Red's operation once and for all. Chris was rummaging through the pile of weapons in the basement when something odd caught his eye, a small box with a large red button in the middle. It looked out of place amid the rifles, grenades, and military-grade equipment, but it was impossible to ignore. His fingers hovered over it, curiosity getting the better of him. Hey, check this out. What do you think this thing is? Mr. Dugan said. I don't know, but I wouldn't mess with it. Could be anything. Probably something dangerous. You mess with that, you could be signing your own death warrant. Big Red doesn't play around with his toys. Chris responded, "Really? It's just a button. How bad could it be?" Before Chris could inspect it further, one of the thugs, still dazed from the fight but conscious enough to speak, groaned from the ground. Colton, Zach, and Mr. Rence were still in the heat of their battle with Big Red. The towering figure of Big Red was strong and relentless, but Colton's lightning strikes and Zach's telekinesis had started to wear him down. In a flash, Mr. Rence had shape-shifted into a goose, his wings flapping furiously as he honked and attacked Big Red with the violent tendencies that only an enraged goose could muster. He pecked at Big Red's legs and wings slapped his face, causing the man to stumble back in confusion. What the hell? A damn goose? I don't care what anyone says. Geese are terrifying. Something's happening downstairs. I'm gonna check it out. Colton, go. We'll handle things here. Chris, don't touch that! I know what that is! What? It's just a button! Zach sprinted toward the stairwell, making his way down into the basement where he found Chris standing over the strange box with the red button, his hand hovering just above it. Mr. Dugan and Mr. Callaway were staring at the box warily, and the thug on the ground was still muttering warnings. No, that's not just a button, it's a self-destruction mechanism. We've got one like it in the Hero League weapons room. A self-destruction device? Why would Big Red have one of these? The Hero League keeps one in case of emergencies. If we ever need to blow up headquarters and go off the grid. Big Red probably has the same idea for this warehouse. If you press that button, it could blow up the entire place. Zach, there are too many of them. We're not going to be able to hold them off. Mr. Rence, Mr. Callaway, and I can't handle them all. This might be our only way to stop them. Zach, VO. We can handle it. We just need time. Don't press that button, Chris. If you do, you're putting us all at risk. There's no time, Zach. We need to take them all out at once. Self-destruct sequence activated. 3 minutes until detonation. Zach, VO. Chris, what did you just do? Before Zach could stop him, Chris's hand shot forward, slamming the button down. The box let out a low hum, and suddenly a robotic voice began emanating from the device. This facility will self-destruct in 3 minutes. Evacuate immediately. Chris's voice echoed in the background. We've got to get out of here. But at least this way, the weapons, the thugs, and Big Red's operation are all going down with the warehouse. Mr. Dugan and Mr. Callaway stepped back, their expressions grim as the warning echoed throughout the warehouse. The voice continued, louder this time. All right, fine. Let's move. We've got to warn the others. Zach cursed under his breath, but there was no time to argue. This facility will self-destruct in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Big Red's voice roared in disbelief. What have you done? Colton and Mr. Rence, still in goose form, had finally subdued Big Red, pinning him to the ground. Just as they were about to secure him, the warning echoed through the entire warehouse. Looks like Chris pushed the button. Mr. Rence, not great timing. We've got 2 minutes to get out of here. Chris activated the self-destruct. Colton, let's go. We'll take Big Red with us. No way he's walking away from this. Zach, Colton, and Mr. Rence hoisted Big Red to his feet, dragging him along as they rushed for the exit. The clock was ticking, and the warehouse was already beginning to shake, debris falling from the ceiling as the countdown continued. As they sprinted for the exit, they knew they had just minutes to escape, and when the warehouse blew, Big Red's entire operation would be wiped off the map. As the voice of the self-destruct countdown echoed through the warehouse, Colton, Zach, Chris, Mr. Rence, and Mr. Dugan sprinted toward the exit with Big Red struggling in their grasp. The ground beneath them rumbled as debris began to fall from the ceiling, the walls vibrating with the impending explosion. The adrenaline pumping through their veins pushed them to move faster, knowing they had only seconds to escape. Colton, come on, move! We're not leaving without you, Red! Zach and Chris flanked either side of Big Red, helping drag him along, while Mr. Dugan kept an eye out for any other thugs. Behind them, the warehouse groaned as the explosives neared detonation. But in the chaos, Mr. Callaway had stayed behind, determined to collect as many of the weapons from the basement as he could. They hadn't noticed his absence yet. Mr. Rence, get in, now! Bursting through the entrance, the group rushed to the van, which was already idling by the side of the warehouse. Mr. Rence threw the door open, shifting into his regular form as he jumped into the driver's seat. Big Red, you idiots aren't taking me anywhere. Mr. Dugan, you are going in that van, Red, whether you like it or not. Big Red, sensing an opportunity, twisted violently in Colton and Zach's grip. He swung his arms, nearly breaking free, but Mr. Dugan quickly reacted, flicking his blade fingers out, just enough to terrify Big Red back into compliance. Big Red, get off me! After a brief struggle, they managed to wrestle Big Red toward the back of the van, shoving him roughly toward the trunk. Big Red wasn't going down without a fight, kicking and pushing back with all his strength. Zach rolled his eyes, using his telekinesis to forcefully shove Big Red into the trunk. The villain's body jerked forward as the invisible force lifted him off the ground, tossing him inside the van's rear compartment. He landed with a heavy thud, groaning as the door slammed shut behind him. Colton, well, that was fun. Colton wiped his brow, his heart still racing. Suddenly, a loud, ear-splitting boom erupted from the warehouse. The group turned just in time to see the building explode in a spectacular display of bright colors. Flashes of orange, red, and yellow bursting through the air as flames shot upward into the night sky. The explosion sent shockwaves through the ground, and the sound of metal and concrete ripping apart echoed for miles. It was both beautiful and terrifying, the fire rising in great plumes, lighting up the sky like fireworks. The force of the blast knocked everyone off balance for a second, but they quickly steadied themselves, watching in awe as the warehouse was consumed by flames. It was clear, everything inside was gone, obliterated in an instant. But as the flames continued to climb higher, a sudden realization hit them all like a punch to the gut. Colton, he stayed behind in the basement. He was trying to get the weapons. Colton's heart sank, and his eyes widened in horror as he looked around frantically. Zach's face went pale, and Mr. Rence cursed under his breath, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly.
He couldn't have survived that. No one could.
No, not even an immortal could survive that. The fire, the impact, his body wouldn't have stood a chance. He's gone.
Mr. Dugan's expression darkened, and for a moment, there was only silence among them. The reality of the situation hit them like a tidal wave. Mr. Callaway, their friend, their mentor, hadn't made it out. He had stayed behind to try and save what he could, but now he was gone, consumed by the explosion. The weight of those words hung heavily in the air as the group piled into the van, the fire from the warehouse still burning brightly in the distance. Mr. Rence started the van, his expression somber, as he pulled away from the scene. The drive back to Hero League headquarters was eerily quiet, the usual banter gone, replaced by the crushing reality of their loss.
He was trying to save the weapons, to keep them out of the wrong hands. And now...
He didn't deserve this. He should have made it out with us.
Colton stared out the window, his thoughts swirling with grief.
He was one of the best. Even after everything, he always had our backs. And now...
After a long silence, Chris spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. Zach, sitting next to him, clenched his fists. Colton stared out the window, his thoughts swirling with grief. Mr. Dugan, sitting in the front, shook his head, his voice rough. The group fell silent again, each of them mourning in their own way. They knew Mr. Callaway had lived a long life, but this felt wrong. To lose him in such a violent, unexpected way without even being able to say goodbye left a heavy weight on their hearts. As they neared headquarters, the realization that Mr. Callaway was gone, truly gone, sank in deeper. And though they had succeeded in taking down Big Red's operation, the victory felt hollow. Without Mr. Callaway beside them, the win meant little. The drive back to headquarters was long and quiet, the team still in shock over the loss of one of their most valued friends and allies. The group piled into Connor's office, the weight of the mission still heavy on their shoulders. Colton, Zach, Chris, Mr. Rence, and Mr. Dugan stood before the Hero League commander, their faces grim as they prepared to give their debriefing. Connor sat behind his desk, his eyes sharp as always, ready to hear their report. Colton, we shut down Big Red's operation. The weapons, the buyers, it's all gone, but the warehouse, it blew. We tried to get out in time, but Mr. Callaway, Zach, he stayed behind to collect the weapons. We thought he didn't make it. Connor's expression shifted, but before he could respond, the office door creaked open behind them. The group turned, their hearts stopping for a moment as Mr. Callaway stepped into the room, alive and well. He looked completely unscathed, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Chris, how is this possible? Colton, we thought you were gone.
You forget, like Carl and Connor, I'm immortal. Not even an explosion that big could keep me down.
Mr. Callaway chuckled, stepping forward with a casual confidence.
You scared the hell out of us.
It'll take more than a warehouse blowing up to take me out.
The group stared in stunned silence for a moment before the shock melted into relief, wide grins spreading across their faces. Zack let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Mr. Callaway shrugged, his expression warm.
You're unbelievable.
Welcome back, Callaway. Let's hear the full story then. What happened out there?
The mood in the room shifted instantly. What had been a somber debriefing became a reunion filled with relief and quiet laughter. Colton shook his head, unable to stop smiling. Connor stood, a faint smile on his own face. With Mr. Callaway back among them, the group launched into their debriefing, filling Connor in on the details of the mission. But this time, there was no sense of loss. Only the shared triumph of taking down Big Red, and the relief that their mentor was still standing strong. In the dimly lit Villain League headquarters, the tension in Conference Room 527 was palpable. The villains sat around the long, dark table, their eyes focused on Plasma Boy at the head. The group included the Snake, the Opposite Lord, and several other notorious figures from their ranks. Plasma Boy had called this meeting with a purpose, and everyone was eager to hear what he had to say.
As most of you know, my father, Plasma Man, has fled to Afghanistan following the destruction of the cloning machine by the Hero League. He's gone to lay low, which leaves me in charge.
Plasma Boy stood up, his usually playful demeanor replaced by a stern expression.
I know this is going to be a change for all of us. You're used to my father making all the decisions, calling all the shots. But he's put me in charge, and I'm ready to lead.
And what makes you think you can fill his shoes, Plasma Boy? Plasma Man's been our leader for decades.
I've been at his side long enough to know how things work. I've earned my place here, and I'm not just going to be a placeholder while he's gone. This is my time to lead.
There were murmurs around the table. It was no secret that Plasma Boy had always been second in command, living in the shadow of his powerful father. But now, things were different. His father's absence had created a power vacuum, and it was up to Plasma Boy to step up. The villains fell silent, watching him closely. Even the Opposite Lord, seated beside him, watched him with a mixture of curiosity and admiration.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Opposite Lord, I've been in love with you since the day you joined the Villain League back in 2002. I still remember the moment we first met. You were this rogue villain with no place to belong, and the League gave you the guidance you needed. My father gave me the chance to train you, and through that, we became close. I fell in love with you, and I've loved you ever since. I know my father always wanted to pick my future wife. He thinks he knows what's best for me, for the family, but I don't care. He's gone now, and this is the perfect chance to stand up to him and make my own decision. I love you, and I don't want to wait any longer. By the time my father gets back, it'll be too late for him to do anything about it. Will you marry me?
Plasma Boy took a deep breath, his heart racing with what he was about to do next. He turned to the Opposite Lord, his eyes softening as he looked at her. For a brief moment, the rest of the room faded away. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Then, without another word, he dropped to one knee before her, the sound of his movement echoing in the room. The Opposite Lord's eyes widened in shock, her gaze locked on his.
Yes, I'll marry you.
Plasma Boy opened the small box, revealing a ring with a dark gemstone at its center, surrounded by intricate silverwork. It was a ring befitting villains like them, elegant, powerful, and dangerous. The Opposite Lord blinked, her usually composed expression wavering as emotion flooded her features. She glanced around the room, seeing the stunned faces of their fellow villains before returning her gaze to Plasma Boy.
When my father gets back, we'll already be married. He can't take this from us. We're in this together.
After a brief pause, her lips curved into a smile and her eyes gleamed. Plasma Boy slid the ring onto her finger, standing up to pull her into a gentle embrace. The weight of his decision settled over him, but he didn't regret it for a second. This was his choice, his life, and for the first time he had made a move that wasn't dictated by his father's expectations.
The future of the Villain League is changing. My father's reign is far from over, but while he's away, we'll continue to grow stronger. And now, we do it together.
As he held the Opposite Lord close, he whispered in her ear. Plasma Boy looked back at the other villains in the room, his expression shifting back to leadership mode. The villains nodded in agreement, their respect for Plasma Boy growing. He had taken a bold step, not only in his leadership but in his personal life, and they were beginning to see that he was capable of leading in his own way. As the meeting continued, Plasma Boy and the Opposite Lord shared a knowing look. Their future was no longer in the shadow of Plasma Man, it was theirs to build. To be continued.